When someone loses a family member, we don't say, it's been 2 weeks, time to move on. So why do we expect organizational grief to work differently? What keeps people stuck is unexpressed grief that has nowhere to go, so it gets spilled everywhere in different forms than how it started. Expressing it naturally just helps it move through. I'm not going to convince you that these layoffs are a good thing. It stinks that we're in this situation. And I know that this represents real loss. You're losing colleagues, people you work closely with, maybe even consider friends. You're losing ways of working that felt comfortable and perhaps a vision of what this company could be. Your team is grieving. You know it by now. You've been listening to this 3-part series on ambiguous grief. But what do you actually say? How do you acknowledge loss without making it worse? How do you build trust when everything feels broken? Welcome to the Hard Skills. I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, and you are listening to the final 3rd episode of a special 3-part series on ambiguous grief in organizations. In part 1, we introduced ambiguous grief and how the changes within organizations create legitimate loss. In part 2, we exposed the 3 problematic responses: minimizing, false optimization, and conflict avoidance. And today, we're talking about how to apply grief-informed leadership, the practical framework for leading through loss. This is the final part of my organizational grief series. What if we approached organizational change the way that we approach other forms of loss, with acknowledgement, compassion, and realistic healing expectations? I mean, think about personal grief. When someone loses a family member, we don't say, it's been 2 weeks, time to move on. We don't insist, this is actually great because now you'll have more time to focus on yourself. We don't avoid them because their sadness makes us uncomfortable. Well, okay, some of you do avoid, but you know it's not a great thing to do. So we acknowledge the loss. We sit with them. We give them time and space and grace. So why do we expect organizational grief to work differently? Research shows that ambiguous grief requires different healing approaches. With traditional grief, you eventually get closure. But with ambiguous grief, closure is hard to access when the source of the loss remains present, as we've been talking about, right? So healing focuses on 3 things instead: meaning making, accepting the changed relationship, and fostering connection. And here's what it looks like in practice at work. First, name it to tame it. Acknowledge loss explicitly. Name what's being lost. Don't minimize it. Don't gloss over it. You can say things like, we're losing people who have been here for years and who many of you consider friends, or this restructure means that some of you will lose autonomy you've had, or I know this acquisition feels like losing our identity. Yes, literally name what people are experiencing. We call that name it to tame it. You don't have to use the word grief if it doesn't feel natural. Just use their language. Loss, uncertainty, disruption, but name it directly because it's there anyway. People know it's there. By not naming it doesn't mean that it's not there, right? Okay, second, be the emotional container. Create space for processing. So what that means is hold discussions where people can share what they're grieving. This isn't wallowing. It's necessary people work. You might say, I want to open space for us to talk about what we're losing in this transition. Or what are you going to miss most about how things were? Or what feels hardest about this change for you? Or what do you feel like you're being asked to let go of and that you wish you weren't, that wasn't the case? And how are you making sense of that? And then, this is crucial, you listen. You don't fix, you don't problem solve, you don't offer silver linings, no toxic positivity here. You definitely don't persuade them to feel or think differently about it. You offer a grounded presence to just capture the experience. And I call that serving as an emotional container, right? You're just holding the emotions that are present. Many leaders don't realize how important this part of their job is, to be an emotional container. An emotional container offers a contained space to hold the emotions so it doesn't spill out everywhere. So some leaders worry, won't this make things worse? No, what keeps people stuck is unexpressed grief that has nowhere to go, so it gets spilled everywhere in different forms than how it started. Expressing it naturally just helps it move through. Okay, third, focus on meaning and purpose, not closure. You can't offer closure when the situation is ongoing, but you can offer a new shape to the experience by helping employees reconnect to a deeper purpose or a new meaning for it all. Many people experience this when they experience post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth often coexists with the struggle itself, but it allows for a new appreciation for relationships, inner strength building, new possibilities in other areas. Having time to reflect on the experience is what helps that growth. And you can start accessing it through questions like, what first drew you to this work that we're doing? Or when you think about why our work matters, what comes to mind? Or how can we honor what we're losing while recreating what's next? Help people find threads of continuity. What values remain even through the structured change? What mission persists even though the team looks different? Okay. Fourth, model vulnerable leadership. Share your struggles with the situation, not in a way that burdens your team with your emotions, nor in a way that makes it about you or that it's minimizing their experiences, but simply in a way that gives permission for others to feel like they can share openly as well. So you might say, I'm struggling with this too. I miss how things were. Or I don't have all the answers and that's really uncomfortable for me. Or I'm working to make sense of it just like you are. Authenticity creates psychological safety. When leaders admit they're human, they have had the same thoughts, everyone else gets permission to be human too. Here's what it might sound like if you put all of this together. So imagine that maybe you're addressing your team after layoffs. Here's what you might say that puts all of these ideas together. We're at a major turning point. We've lost funding, which makes it feel like walking on a tightrope. I'm not going to convince you that these layoffs are a good thing. It stinks that we're in this situation. And I know that this represents real loss. You're losing colleagues, people you work closely with, maybe even consider friends. You're losing ways of working that felt comfortable and perhaps a vision of what this company could be. I see that loss. I sense it too. I feel it too. I'm not going to ask you to pretend you don't. At the same time, our work is still critically important. Our customers count on us to show up every day. The work we do matters, and that hasn't changed. There's only one way we're going to weather this together, and that's supporting each other. We're going to acknowledge grief when it surfaces. We're going to provide space to process it and support each other through it. And rather than just pretending it's business, we will acknowledge it. So over the next few weeks, I'll be scheduling conversations where we can talk openly about what this means. And I'm not going to have all the answers, but I will try to show up honestly, and I hope you will too. So, remember Maya from episode 1? Here's how her story ended when her boss did something like this. Once her boss stopped trying to pretend the team wasn't affected, the team started having real conversations. They acknowledged the losses they were all experiencing. They saw each other more authentically. Dignity and relationships were preserved. And with a team that felt like their leader could show up for them, which rebuilt some trust. The future of organizational leadership isn't about eliminating difficult emotions. It's about developing the emotional intelligence to guide people through these difficult, challenging situations with wisdom, compassion, and authenticity. Organizations that can do grief-informed leadership well build deeper trust. Employees smell dishonesty and platitudes from a mile away, but they can also become deeply invested when they feel emotionally and psychologically supported through honest, vulnerable responses. So this week, reflect. What would it mean for your leadership to embrace grief-informed practices? What would it mean for you in your leadership? What's one conversation you've been avoiding that needs to happen? How might acknowledging loss actually accelerate your team's healing and performance? If you've been facing these challenges in your organization and want support, I work with leaders and teams on exactly these kinds of transitions, and you can find out more about my coaching, my consulting, and workshop facilitation at towerscope.com. And you can click on the button that says free consultation if you want to talk through it with me a little bit further to see if there's a way that I can support you with this. But this closes out our organizational grief series. I hope that it was useful. I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, and this is The Hard Skills.